On this Tuesday night, intensifying space race. What a NASA official fears could happen if China beats the U.S. to the punch.
We need to protect the interest of the international community.
Pricey pipeline.
They were set up for failure.
How construction costs for Trans Mountain's expansion project are soaring to staggering levels. Canadian media versus Meta. The push to probe the tech giant over its new ban on news. Plus, less is more.
It's sort of like this delicious circle of satisfaction.
The benefits for both companies and staff with 4-day work weeks.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. It is seen as the gateway mission to a future flight to Mars. Today, the Artemis II crew, including Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, got a first look at the spacecraft that will fly them around the moon late next year. But during today's press conference, a comment raised by NASA Administrator Bill Nelson shed light on the geopolitical reality of the first crewed moon mission in more than half a century. There is an intensifying space race between the U.S. and China. Mike Drolet now on the rocky lunar relations.
The Artemis II crew look ready to conquer the cosmos. For the first time, they were able to see the ship that will catapult them into a lunar orbit late next year, which Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen said sent shivers down their spines.
I already knew going to the moon was hard, but boy, it's harder than I thought.
Artemis is about the 386,000-kilometer 3-day voyage to the moon. But the big picture is so much larger, because what NASA really wants to do is complete the 225 million kilometer 6-month trip to Mars. But all of their best laid plans could be moot if they don't get to the moon first.
We're in a space race with China. You see the actions of the Chinese government on Earth. They go out and claim some international islands in the South China Sea, and then they claim them as theirs.
Indeed, China began building an airbase in the Spratly Islands in 2015, staking its claim to all fishing and gas resources. Today's space race has more similarities to that economic land grab than it does to the space race of the 50s and 60s, which saw the US and Russia competing for bragging rights. Both NASA and China's space agency are eyeing similar landing spots near the moon's south pole, which is pockmarked with deep, dark craters that are believed to be filled with ice, and with it, the resources to create fuel for the trip to Mars.
So naturally, I don't want China to get to the South Pole first with humans and then say, this is ours, stay out.
Thus far, it appears NASA has a leg up on China. The Artemis III moon landing with humans is scheduled for December 2025, while China's plans are to land robots by 2026 and humans before 2030, or so they say. Another advantage for NASA, 28 countries have signed on to the Artemis Accords, with the aim to share in whatever is discovered.
And if indeed we find water in abundance there that could be utilized for future crews, we want to make sure that that's available to all.
But China isn't playing by the Artemis rules, and just like the first space race, it's all about who gets there first. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The construction cost overruns for the pipeline that Ottawa bought are jaw-dropping. And Trans Mountain's plans to pass those costs on to oil companies who plan to ship their product on the line appear to be fading fast. Purchased from Kinder Morgan for $4.7 billion and initially expected to cost $5.4 billion to build, the price of twinning the line connecting Edmonton and Burnaby has ballooned to $30.9 billion by March of 2023, and money is still being spent. Trans Mountain had planned to recover some of those funds by hiking the price of using the pipeline. But as Heather Yourex-West reports, oil companies and Canada's energy regulators have pushed back.
In the heart of Canada's energy sector, the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion was seen as a beacon of hope.
Everybody was excited. Everybody wanted to be a part of it at one time.
This pipeline engineer, a man we'll call Brian, worked as a construction manager on a section of the Trans Mountain pipeline project. We've agreed to protect Brian's identity over fears that sharing his experiences might impact his current employment.
I know for a lot of the people that were involved in the construction, there is a sense of, we messed this one up, but they're more disappointed that, due to the poor planning and just a lack of forethought, that they were set up for failure.
Originally expected to cost between $5 and $6 billion, costs have ballooned to more than $30 billion so far.
Are you surprised that this project is facing such a large cost overrun?
No. You look at the initial cost estimate of $7 to $8 billion was completely infeasible. Moving out to start construction, not all of the little things like land acquisition and right-of-way survey were completed. It was sort of starting a little bit unprepared, so to speak.
Trans Mountain says 70% of the project followed the pipeline's original right-of-way, and that contractors were engaged early to develop construction execution plans, adding there were many reasons why the project experienced cost growth and schedule delays. When the pipeline is finally in operation, it will start making some of its investment back. Oil producers have signed 20-year contracts to ship their product down the line, but the proposed cost of shipment is already causing conflict. Suncor, Cenovus, and Canadian Natural say the fees on the table are too high.
They're worried about the tariff, and they're going to probably argue about the actual cost.
Canada's energy regulator rejected Trans Mountain's request to fast-track its proposed fee hikes. A series of hearings will be held to review the company's application instead. But based on the contracts signed, Trans Mountain will never be able to recover its construction overruns in revenue alone.
So very likely, if the federal government's going to want to sell this, they're going to have to take a write-down and sell it at a much reduced value compared to what has been spent so far.
Citing an independent economic impact assessment, Trans Mountain says the pipeline's construction will contribute more than $9 billion to Canada's GDP over the next 20 years, while ensuring Canada receives fair market value for its oil, something that is currently sold at a discount.
Well, the project itself was a great idea. It was great. I just really feel that it was poorly executed,
resulting in one of the costliest increases for a pipeline project in recent memory, with Canadians likely on the hook for a big part of that bill. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
And we have much more on the story on our website from journalist Kamia Rezavi. To read more about the rising costs of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, head to globalnews.ca/globalnational. As leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre is a well-known, outspoken critic of the Liberal government and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Today, the Conservative Party launched a new effort to introduce Canadians to another side of Poilievre.
Who is Pierre Poilievre? Many know him.
The Conservatives have launched an advertising blitz portraying Poilievre as an approachable family man. As Mackenzie Gray reports, Poilievre has a lot of ground to make up with one key group of voters.
Everything feels broken in Canada.
From political pitbull to personal profile, 3 new ads from the Conservative Party are a big money bet on refining Pierre Poilievre's image.
The Conservatives are trying to define themselves, or else they risk being defined.
Poilievre recently stopped wearing his glasses at events and often ditches a suit and tie for more casual attire. The new look echoed in the ads.
As a guy who loves me for who I am.
The Conservative leader's wife also featured prominently along with their 2 children. Anna Poilievre narrating one of the spots and tweeted it out before her husband. A senior Conservative source saying Canadians are likely to see a lot more of her.
His wife is really a secret weapon. I mean, anybody that saw her speak at the convention about a year and a half ago thought, wow, what an asset that is.
And the Conservatives hope their secret weapon will boost her husband's standing with women. Poilievre is behind 21 points to Justin Trudeau with women, one of the few places the Liberals are ahead of the Conservatives. Overall, 59% of Canadians moderately or strongly disapprove of the Prime Minister, but not that far behind is Poilievre at 50%, a higher number than the past 4 Conservative leaders after nearly a year in the top job.
Well, he probably was told that he needed to soften his tone to try to reassure the center of the political spectrum and also those suburban ridings that he needs to win an election.
But Poilievre's tough tone has propelled the Conservatives to a 10-point lead over the Liberals. But when you drill down on the regional level, it shows the Conservatives will likely need more support to comfortably form government.
We mentioned every election, the GTA, there's over 30 seats in there, and many seats were won by very close margins for the Liberals.
The Conservatives have dropped $3 million on these ads, and they easily could have spent more. With a substantial lead in fundraising numbers and no election period rules, Farah, impacting the amount they could spend.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mackenzie. And those ads will appear on Facebook and Instagram feeds, but news articles will not. And Canadian media outlets are urging Canada's Competition Bureau to do something about that. They're asking for an investigation into Meta. Meta is the parent company of those social media platforms, and its ban on news. It's retaliation for the Online News Act, or Bill C-18, which is supposed to level the playing field for tech giants and newsrooms. As Taria Isri explains, it could have the opposite effect.
If you're searching for news on Facebook or Instagram, you won't find it. Meta is blocking news on their platforms in retaliation for C-18, which requires tech giants to pay publishers and broadcasters for sharing their content.
You cannot block access to news, which deprives Canadians of news.
News Media Canada, the CBC, and the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, which includes Global News, are urging Canada's Competition Bureau to investigate what they're calling Meta's abuse of its dominant position.
They control something like 70% of the market.
C-18 is meant to bring advertising dollars back into shrinking newsrooms. In a statement, Heritage Minister Pascal Saint-Onge says Meta would rather block their users from accessing good quality and local news instead of paying their fair share to news organizations. But the tech giant calls C-18 unfair and unworkable.
What the platforms want to do here is they want to avoid regulation.
Media experts question how much the complaint will actually accomplish.
The Competition Bureau is known for taking a long time to come to a decision.
Facebook has done this before, when Australia introduced similar legislation. The impasse eventually ended, and tech companies now pay Australian news organizations approximately $200 million a year.
The reason it worked in Australia is the Australian government got out of the way and went back to the status quo, which is letting the platforms and the news industry work out their own deals.
The Competition Bureau confirms it has received the complaint, but it won't comment on what kind of recourse, if any, it will take. The Bureau insists examining the conduct of large digital companies remains a top priority. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Working smarter, not harder. Coming up, why the 4-day work week is gaining traction. The largest 4-day work week trial in North America has wrapped, and hours worked are down, but efficiency is up. Anne Gaviola speaks with one of the Canadian companies involved.
Get your workforce to do the same amount of work or more in a shorter amount of time. At first, the equation didn't make sense to the CEO of Fresh Squeezed Ideas, a pharmaceutical strategy company.
I was definitely tentative and apprehensive on it.
The company's first stab at adopting a 4-day work week didn't work out so well. But with some tweaks, Freedom Friday gave way to Flexible Friday.
What happened for our people is actually an improvement in their overall emotional and mental health. They've had more time in, kind of in their personal world to do the things that are passion projects for themselves. And that actually allows them to bring more of themselves into work.
41 companies took part in the 4-day workweek trial, which spanned 6 months, including 9 Canadian companies, all of which are keeping the 4-day structure after the pilot.
Hundreds and if not thousands of people connect in with us and want some details about how we've done it.
4-Day Week Global runs the increasingly popular pilot programs, improving workflows, cutting down on time wasters like meetings that could have been an email. The result? Fewer sick calls and increased productivity over fewer days.
It's sort of like this delicious circle of satisfaction that starts to impact. So I'm happier at work, so I'm happier at home. I do other things outside of work and then I'm happier back at work.
Proponents call it win-win. Employees don't see a reduction in earnings. Workers are more engaged. After all, the 5-day work week is a holdover from the Industrial Revolution, and the pandemic has opened people's eyes to what is now possible at work and at home. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
War of attrition ahead, these sobering updates on Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russia. Thousands of people in Ireland are saying their last goodbye to Sinead O'Connor. The singer's family invited the public to line the streets of Bray for her funeral procession. Fans left flowers and handwritten notes outside O'Connor's former family home, thanking her for her music and her voice. O'Connor was 56 years old. Tens of thousands of scouts, including some Canadians, began arriving at their new accommodations in South Korea today. They're being put up in university dorms, corporate training centers, and hotels. The government abandoned the huge coastal campsite for the World Scout Jamboree ahead of a tropical storm. The event has already struggled with health concerns after hundreds of participants became sick due to the heat. And Ukraine officials are accusing Russia of targeting emergency workers drawn to the scene of an air attack. At least 7 people were killed in the strike on a residential building and hotel. 80 others were hurt. Rescuers were scrambling to dig out survivors when a second missile hit. The attack happened in the eastern Donetsk region, partly occupied by Russia. Kyiv is focused on reclaiming lost territory and holding back invading forces. But as Crystal Gamansing reports, progress is slow and it's complicated.
Step by step, Ukraine's military commander-in-chief says the country is creating conditions to advance. Staromayorsk in the Donetsk region is one of a handful of villages reclaimed since the start of the summer offensive. It's hard. They have pre-sighted zones, methodically destroyed roads, says this 24-year-old Marine. Russia's defense minister last month commented on their well-constructed defensive lines and firing positions. Former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine Bill Taylor says an earlier start to the counteroffensive would have benefited Ukraine, but just wasn't possible.
They were digging in deeply and in depth. And putting in the obstacles and the minefields that we're now reading about. So had the Ukrainians been able to go on the offensive sooner, it would have given the Russians less time to prepare.
The Ukrainian president told the BBC last month that progress has been slower than desired, but added some people believe this is a Hollywood movie and expect results now. It's not. The West has invested heavily with money and weapons, including a U.S. donation of cluster munitions, a weapon that, while banned by many countries, could help Ukraine break through those heavily entrenched Russian lines.
The slowness of the provision of some of that aid is a huge factor in why this offensive is going as slowly as it is.
Fighter jets are another Western promise. With training in Romania set to start later this month, it's unlikely they'll be used in this counteroffensive.
I think it's very inappropriate at best for anybody in the West or anybody outside of Ukraine to be critical of Ukrainian military decisions.
Ukraine, meanwhile, is hitting Russian bridges in occupied areas and tactical storage locations in support of their counteroffensive. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Next, the hype and skepticism surrounding a potentially massive scientific breakthrough. The science world is buzzing over an apparent breakthrough in the field of quantum mechanics. A team of Korean scientists says it has synthesized a superconducting material they call LK99, saying it could be a new era for mankind. If it's true, it could make everything from batteries to power lines and computers far more efficient. Scientists around the world have been trying to replicate the findings, but as Redmond Shannon reports, it's starting to look like this breakthrough may be too good to be true.
When this simple video was released along with 2 scientific papers last month, it was claimed to herald a monumental breakthrough. The Korean researchers said it shows a room temperature superconductor that they called LK99. Across the globe, it created huge excitement that this holy grail had been found. A superconductor has 2 remarkable properties. First, it can levitate in a magnetic field. And, as the name suggests, it is amazingly efficient at conducting electricity. Electrical appliances like a computer or a cell phone heat up when they're working hard. That's because there is electrical resistance within the wiring. Effectively, it's energy wasted. A superconductor material would solve that issue and potentially so many others. Power generation and storage could become far more efficient. MRI machines much cheaper. And cell phone batteries could last many times longer. Today, superconductors need to be below -100 degrees Celsius to work. Crucially, the Korean team claims their lead-based material works at room temperature and above +100. Their non-peer-reviewed papers included details of the molecular structure and a relatively easy recipe guide for how to make the material, step by step. Cue a worldwide rush among scientists to cook up batches of LK99 to see if they would work.
And so far it hasn't met that mark. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the story just yet.
The consensus in recent days is that LK99 was a false dawn, but one of the paper's authors told a Korean newspaper that a follow-up study will give better instructions a month from now.
There's nothing that tells us it's not possible. So there's no theory or principle that tells us that there's any limit to the temperature at which superconductivity can exist.
After the hype, there is still hope. Unlike superconductors, scientific discovery never comes without resistance. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that's Global National for this Tuesday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is Morning Star Mill in St. Catharines, Ontario. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.